As far as cryptids go for the Fallout franchise, I doubt many people think of any games aside from 76, considering, well, 13 of the 20 are just in that one game. But every entry of the franchise has at least one. So, from bone aliens to Wendigo, this is all of the cryptids in the Fallout franchise. Fallout 1's Bone Aliens. This one screenshot is all you get of aliens in Fallout 1. But there's obviously more to it. Like, if you interact with a UFO, it'll say property of Area 51, return if found. Which Area 51 was going to be a location in the second Fallout game, but ended up getting scrapped unfortunately. These aliens would also carry an alien blaster and fuzzy painting. Which, if you've played Fallout 2, you've probably seen this painting a good bit, but in Fallout 1, this is the only place you could get it. And if you can't tell, which I can't judge, it's extremely low res, this is actually a painting of Elvis. This here is just a fan recreation. Fallout 2, the only entry for Fallout 2 being Anna Winslow. Little is known about Anna, except for that her family lived in the Den, possibly even before the Great War. And after the family passed away, including Anna, her spirit became trapped in our realm, since this guy Joey stole her locket from her family house, dooming her to eternal suffering. That is, unless you get her locket back, as a side quest, finally freeing her. So for this list of cryptids, from what I could find on the wiki, for everyone pre-Fallout 76, it's basically just aliens. So, these are the aliens in Fallout 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76. These aliens, or Zetans, tend to look the same from game to game, and have reportedly been on Earth since 1697. Maybe even longer, considering some of these captives in the Mothership Zeta DLC were old samurai and cowboy. In this DLC, you would infiltrate an alien spacecraft and get to learn a lot more about them. The Mothership Zeta DLC for Fallout 3 is the most we get of aliens for the Fallout franchise, versus say in New Vegas or 4 where you just come across some crash and they'll try to kill you. This DLC shows how old they are and how, in fact, not all of them are hostile. Like the worker aliens won't attack you at all, and instead will just run away. If you kill them, you even lose karma. These aliens are extremely old, and a popular theory was that they started the Great War, but with some recent pieces of Fallout media, you get to learn that it actually wasn't them. Fallout 76 does the aliens probably second best in the franchise. Having different variants, like in the Fallout 3 DLC, the Zetans of Appalachia can be found in the Enclave Research Facility, hinting at the Enclave using their technology and experimenting on them, which, as mentioned in other games, they do. They can also be found around destroyed campsites or in the Invaders from Beyond event, where you have to kill lots of them descending from their spaceship before finally getting to kill their leader. The variants in this game are the Cryogenic Alien, Toxic Alien, Alien Drone, and lastly, the Alien Invader. Fallout 4's Nuka World's Lucy Grandchester. This one is similar to Fallout 2's Anna Winslow, with Lucy being a ghost, but this time she's quite a bit younger. Lucy was a daughter of Morticia and Hannibal Grandchester. According to legend, she killed her parents and was put into a mental asylum. She escaped on her 18th birthday and was found hanging in the attic of Grandchester Mystery Mansion 9 days later in an apparent suicide. Her ghost haunts her family mansion, which was then turned into an attraction for Nuka World. Her ghost can be seen around the mansion several times, disappearing into dead ends when the main character comes close. Throughout the forests, mountains, and fields of Appalachia lie the most cryptids in this franchise. The Blue Devil. The Blue Devil is a creature in real-life West Virginia folklore, reportedly sighted in Webster County during the winter of 1939 to 1940. It was described as a large bluish dog-like creature with a ghostly howl. One of the first reported sightings of the Blue Devil was by a Jumbo resident, John Clivenger, a former lumber company employee and then farmer, who claimed in December of 1939 that his much-valued hunting dog had been attacked and killed by the beast. Another farmer, Ernest Kogar, reported that his livestock had been spooked for several nights, and a wild animal had attacked and killed one of his cattle and sheep. Others reported their children hearing inhumane screams outside of their homes, which they thought to be a panther. Later on, through tracking down this creature through various reports, they found the Blue Devil. The Blue Devil was actually just a big wolf. Through this Blue Devil getting to be so popular and having a cult following as a cryptid, it was eventually added into Fallout 76 as more of a werewolf-like creature. The Beast of Beckley. The Beast of Beckley is a supposedly four-eyed albino wolf. I say supposedly because the actual model of it in-game just looks like a normal wolf, but the comics always portray four yellow glowing eyes. This Beast of Beckley has you go on a side mission called Death and Taxidermy that revolves around finding Janelle and Raymond as you end up discovering different clues around these destroyed camps and hunting down whatever had killed them, which ends up being the Beast of Berkeley, and you end up killing its pups as well. The Flatwoods Monster is a real-life cryptid just like the Blue Devil, this one being very popular. In the town of Flatwoods, West Virginia in 1952, some teenagers had this experience. It was dusk when they saw it. The May brothers, Ed 13 and Freddie 12, had been playing in their schoolyard with their 10-year-old friend Tommy Heyer. After noticing a pulsing red light streak across the sky and crash on a nearby farm, the three youngsters ran to grab the Mays boy's mother, then hightailed it up that hill to check out where the light had landed. They ran back down in sheer incredible terror. 7 Braxton County residents on Saturday reported seeing a 10-foot-tall Frankenstein-like monster in the hills above Flatwoods. A local newspaper reported afterward that a National Guard member, 17-year-old Gene Lemon, was leading the group when he saw what appeared to be a pair of bright eyes in a tree. Lemon screamed and fell backward, the news account said, when he saw a 10-foot-tall monster with a bloody red body and a green face that seemed to glow. It may have had claws for hands, but it was hard to tell in the dense mist. In-game, the Flatwoods Monster appears very differently, seeming to be wearing a suit and floating around with a purple aura. This cryptid can take control of any nearby creatures it wants to make attack you, giving them this purple aura as well. This creature also has its own comic called Who Goes There? And not a whole lot would be known about this thing if it weren't for photo mode and the models in the in-game files. So, after viewing these, you can tell this is, well, another Zeton. Appearing to be much smaller in actual body size, it gets into a little suit and flies around to mess with the people of Appalachia. Maybe mess is a bit kind of a word. Kill, terrorize, you know. As far as cryptids go, in real life this one is very iconic, and in-game I'd say it's the same. The Snallygaster. The first sightings of this creature were in 18th century Maryland, specifically Frederick County, Maryland. This area was being settled by German immigrants in the beginnings of the 1730s. Early accounts described the community being terrorized by a monster they called the Schnellergeist, meaning quick ghost in German. The earliest incarnations of this creature had half bird feathers of a siren, with the other half being the nightmarish features of demons and ghouls. The Snallygaster was described as half reptile, half flying bird, with a metallic beak designed with razor-sharp teeth, occasionally alongside octopus tentacles. The Snallygaster was rumored to swoop silently in from the sky and pick up and carry off its victims. The creature got back into public eye in the early 1900s, with newspaper accounts throughout February and March of 1909, describing different encounters between local residents and a beast with enormous wings, a long pointed bill, claws like steel hooks, and an eye at the center of its forehead, and has since been adapted into different forms of media, like the second Blair Witch game, Legend of Coffin Rock, being a monster in that, and in 2011 it even sparked its own festival in Washington, D.C. In Fallout 76, this creature, despite having some references to what people described it as in real life on the in-game map, the actual appearance of it is very different, as this creature, according to the lore, is a failed experiment with FEV being done by Westech, FEV being the forced evolutionary virus created by the Enclave. The Snallygaster in-game has 2 arms with 3 claws each, a mouth having a long tentacle-like tongue covered in acid, and multiple eyes along its back. A Snallygaster will use its tongue like a whip up close and spit balls of acid at range. The Snallygaster has at least 40 eyes, 2 rows of teeth, and thorns on its back as well. This cryptid is one of the most seen in-game, and I would say one of the most creepy. There are certain areas where you'll see this everywhere, there being many, many Snallygasters. The Grafton Monster is a real-life cryptid as well, this time the in-game adaptation looking a lot more similar to real life. The story goes that on June 16, 1964, Robert Cockrell got off work at the local newspaper publication, Grafton Sentinel, at 11 p.m. and journeyed home. He He drove down Yates Avenue along the western banks of the Tigert River. He then turned a curve in the road and encountered the Grafton Monster, describing it as a huge white obstruction with slick white skin and no head. He rushed home terrified and called his friends Jerry Morse and Jim Mauser to accompany him for a further investigation at the scene. There was no sight of the monster, but the grass was trampled where it once stood, and a low whistling sound followed them as they investigated. More than 20 calls came in from the people who allegedly sighted the monster. Robert Cockrell wrote an article on the Grafton Monster, which was published in the Sentinel on June 18th. Following these sightings, groups of teenagers went in search of the Grafton Monster, dubbing it monster hunting. Several of them even reportedly sighted the monster. More sightings followed, but no physical evidence was ever found. In Fallout, the Grafton Monster is another mutated creature based on the same DNA strain as a Snallygaster, but is more accurate to the real-life depiction of it. Researchers tweaked the genome, producing a giant that shattered the containment unit, but was otherwise stable, except the absence of a discernible head. The mutant was sedated and transported off-site via truck, with the Great War sidetracking the convoy and allowing the monster to escape due to the nuclear detonation blinding the driver. The resulting monster is headless, hairless, and has grayish color skin with a leathery texture. It stands at around 7.5 feet tall and has an oversized chest. The mutations that turned it into this powerhouse have also changed the skin and led to the development of glands that can eject globs of corrosive, oily substance in a wide area around it. The Jersey Devil is one of the most known cryptids in the US and even outside of it. The creature is believed to be an unwanted 13th child of Mother Leeds. According to those who knew this Mother Leeds, before the birth of her 13th child, she declared that she wished the devil would take the child away from her as it was born. At birth, the child suddenly changed into the ugliest of creatures and flew away into the vast darkness of the Pinelands. It is reported that the Jersey Devil inhabits the eerie and misty wetland areas of the region, venturing out into the woodlands at night, seeking humans to scare away with its piercing screams and grotesque appearance. In Fallout, it looks nothing like the real-life depiction found in Atlantic City. The Jersey Devil itself appears as a part of this quest titled Sins of the Father, where it's more of a sort of fish-like design with a massive sail on its back. No spoilers, but when the Jersey Devil appears, you have to make an important decision with it. It's certainly more of a fish than a flying goat like the real-life design, but I personally prefer this version. It even has its own offspring, known as the Lesser Devils, and if you look on the map of the season that it came out with, you can actually see an accurate depiction of the Jersey Devil. The Mega Sloth. This one, the only thing I could find for it as far as real-life relations go, is the Megatherium. That's a prehistoric sloth-like creature. Aside from this, it's just in Fallout. Before the Great War, Isaac Garahan owned several sloths at his family estate. They are recorded to have escaped the enclosure on at least 2 different occasions, and the lack of sloth remains in the cages at the Garahan estate implied that they escaped following the war. The Mega Sloths are 3-toed sloths mutated by radiation. Standing much taller than the average human, their body is covered with filthy and shaggy fur, with clusters of mushrooms growing on their back similar to the ones of pre-war sloths. These Mega Sloth mushrooms release clouds of spores when the sloth shakes its body, deterring aggressors that get too close. They have heavily calloused patches of skin and sharp teeth. The Mega Sloth, unlike most cryptids, isn't aggressive at all. If you want to go out and find any of these cryptids in-game, this is for sure the safest one to go for. The Agua is a 500-pound alligator snapping turtle that lurks in the Mahangaliha River. A lot of depictions of this in real life show it having 2 heads. In-game, it only has 1. In-game, it is a turtle-like creature, weighing even more than the 500 pounds I would imagine, and the cult of the Mothman have targeted this creature in an attempt to sacrifice it to Mothman, believing its ancient blood holds divine secrets and the ability to see into the past. We'll talk about the cult of Mothman more later. To this end, they have been tracking the creature as it travels south into the Cranberry Fog, where it has taken up residence. You can come across this creature in random encounters where it's found attacking people, super mutants, or scorched, and can be seen in the Beasts of Burden event, where it's trapped by the Mothman cultists and you'll have to eventually kill it. The Sheepsquatch is a cryptid stalking the Appalachian Mountains. The Sheepsquatch myth was an obsession for many cryptid hunters, including one named Calvin Van Lowe, who devoted his life to hunting it down. The cryptid is known to have existed in the years before the Great War, but knowledge of its existence was not very widespread. Graduate students Michael Turner and Cindy Holloway met their ends from a Sheepsquatch, while cryptid hunter Ray Gary was left crippled after encountering one, keeping his experience secret to save others from the same fate. The encounters with the Sheepsquatch in real life were pretty similar, only seen 4 times between 1994 and 2015. If you saw it in the distance, whenever it would notice you, it would run away, until 2015, where the Sheepsquatch turned aggressive, but was then scared away by a loud roar in the distance. In-game, you can come across this Sheepsquatch, but lore-wise, not a whole lot is known. The Smiling Man, better known as by his given name, Indrid Cold, is an Appalachian urban legend associated with the Mothman. Cold himself is sometimes described as a cryptid. In real life, November 1966, a West Virginia resident reported seeing a light in the middle of the road ahead of him. Supposedly, when he approached it, Woodrow met with a man with an unnerving smile that would never fade. The man spoke telepathically to Woodrow and asked for his name. The man introduced himself as Cold, and assured Woodrow that he meant him no harm and wished him only happiness. The same month, the Mothman was first spotted in Point Pleasant. He was noted to stand with his arms crossed over his chest and hands under his armpits as if to keep them warm, and to gesture with his elbows. As discussed in the Mothman prophecies, Derenberger later reported being visited by Men in Black. The emissary in game appears to be based off of these Men in Black. And what's really interesting is that I was actually able to find this interview from 1966 talking about his encounter the day after the Smiling Man event.
Mr. Derenberger has a very interesting story to tell us this evening. Mr. Derenberger, in your own words, would you please relate what happened last night?
There was a car past me, overtaking me from behind, and following closely behind this car was this unidentified flying object. And as the car behind passed me, this object was following close behind it, and it swerved directly in front of my truck, forced me to come to a complete stop. As soon as I had stopped, there was a door opened in the side of this vehicle, and this man stepped out and came directly to me, or came to the truck. He walked to the right-hand side of the truck, and he told me to roll down the window. He asked me to roll down the window on my right-hand side of my truck. And I had done what he asked. And this man stood there, and he first asked me what I was called. And I knew he meant my name, and I told him my name. And he asked me, he said, why are you frightened? He said, don't be frightened, we wish you no harm. He said, we mean you no harm, we wish you only happiness. I told him my name, and when I told him my name, he said he was called Cold. That was the name that he was called by.
In Fallout 76, the design of the character, or cryptid, is extremely similar to the sketch of the real one and even calls himself the same name. He also comments, "Ever dance with a devil under a blue moon?" foreshadowing the Once in a Blue Moon update. This cryptid, being so creepy and intriguing, I really hope plays a bigger role in some future events. And hopefully we learn more about his possible relation to the Mothman. Speaking of the Mothman, on November 15th, 1966, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, told police they had seen a large black creature whose eyes glowed red, standing at the side of the road near the TNT area, the site of a former World War II munitions plant. Linda Scarberry described it as a slender, muscular man, about 7 feet tall with white wings. However, she was unable to discern its face due to the hypnotic effect of its eyes. Distressed, the witnesses sped away, reporting that the creature flew after their car, making a screeching sound as it pursued them. It pursued them as far as the Point Pleasant city limits and then gave up. Some people speculate that it was a heron or crane or some other form of big bird. No matter what it was, it left a huge impression, being one of the most well-known cryptids. In Fallout, the Mothman is very different. Mothmen are a species of mutant insect found in Appalachia. Named after the real-life Mothman, these creatures are worshipped by the cult of the Mothman, who still inhabit the museum at Point Pleasant, dedicated to its mythology. actually being a real-life place as well. The Mothman NPC appears as a part of a random encounter, where if approached or attacked, the Mothman will fly off and disappear. In reality, the Mothman isn't just a singular entity, as there are different versions of the Mothman with different colors and characteristics. Hostile Mothmen can be encountered quite regularly by visiting these cultist locations at night, while others spawn all around Appalachia. The cult of the Mothman worships these Mothmen as divine heralds of a higher power. However, a section of them, calling themselves the Enlightened, exclusively talk and commune with the purple-eyed wise Mothman, which they believe to be a unique sentient mortal creature who somehow existed before the Great War. These purple-eyed Mothman, or men, seem to have the ability to predict the future. As a nuclear holocaust loomed on the horizon, the cult attempted to summon the creature to benefit from its cosmic wisdom and earn protection from the nuclear fire soon to rain from the skies. The summoning was successful on October 22, 2077, but just one of their number, Brother Charles, claimed to have seen the Mothman in a glimpse, who warned of a flood coming on the following day. The cult took this as a signal to gather on the rooftops and avoid the massive flood and prove their faith to the Mothman. The flood came in a form of nuclear fallout. The cultists ultimately survived through the apocalypse by traveling to the Lucky Hole mine across a state nestled into the cliffs overlooking Watoga. The Mothman's eye colors are actually signs of different personalities and powers of these creatures. Hatchlings and vengeful Mothmen have orange eyes, which may represent the species in its basic uninfluenced form. Some orange-eyed adults have light gray wings, also resembling hatchlings. All of these orange-eyed ones are immediately hostile towards vault dwellers. The same is true of the green-eyed glowing Mothmen, produced by exposure to radiation. Mothmen affected by the scorched plague are also known to have green eyes, but are not known to engage peacefully with cultists. And whatever might influence the so-called holy Mothmen to develop red eyes is not understood. The Mothmen who have red eyes are typically skittish and disappear as soon as you get too close. The Wendigo. In real-life Algonquin folklore, a Wendigo is a malevolent spirit, frequently associated with winter, cold, famine, and starvation. It possesses and transforms human beings who have committed sins such as selfishness, greed, gluttony, murder, and especially cannibalism. The spirit then forces them to consume human flesh, turning them into a monster with an insatiable hunger for it. The Wendigo is also a part of the traditional belief system of many Algonquin-speaking cultures, such as the Ojibwe, Eastern Cree, Saulteaux, West Main Swampy Cree, Niskapi, and Innu peoples. Though the folklore among cultures varies somewhat, the Wendigo is commonly seen as an evil, cannibalistic, supernatural entity. Traditionally, some indigenous people believe that to discuss this being is to give it power. It is considered a symbol of trauma and loss, sometimes associated with settler violence against indigenous people. Any association between the creature and deer is a recent invention of pop culture. So even though when you think of this creature you may think of this, although it is amazing looking, and I personally do prefer it in some ways, it's not really accurate. The deer skull isn't mentioned at all by any of the people who tell of this legend. From what I could find, the skull is actually from a 2001 indie horror movie just titled Wendigo. So in reality, the Wendigo would look more something like this. As in the simplest, most basic form, it is just a human who has gone crazy and developed an insatiable urge for cannibalism. In Fallout, they surprisingly went for the realistic design, making it way more scary in my opinion. Lore-wise, there's not too much to say with this one, being pretty much the same as the real-life counterparts, aside from a few differences. Like, they have a screeching ability that, when used, can attract nearby feral ghouls to your location and have them attack you. More with this connection of ghouls, some people believe that the Wendigos are actually a subtype of feral ghouls, or a similar type of mutant. During the Vault 79 raid, a Wendigo can be found among the populace of feral ghouls, implying that they have mutated alongside them. Feral ghouls can often be found working in tandem with Wendigos in various locations and not being hostile to one another. So yeah, that's a... Wait, what? Often found in blast zones or in the A Colossal Problem event, the Wendigo Colossus, or Colossi, are large and powerful variants of the Wendigo. Having 3 different heads and standing much taller than most creatures in Appalachia, you really don't want to come across this thing. Lore-wise, there's not a whole lot different for this type of Wendigo, but there is a very iconic Wendigo Colossus named Earl Williams. Earl Williams worked at a local mine. He was a single father to Maggie after his wife left early on. Hornwright Industrial bought the rights to this mine in April of 2075, replacing the workers with auto miners. At first, this seemed like a blessing to the town, which was plagued by financial hardship. The auto miners worked quickly and efficiently and extracted all the coal from the mine, fully exhausting every vein in January of 2076. As Hornwright Industrial prepared to leave the mine, Williams and some other townfolk drunkenly decided to steal some supplies from the mine before everything was taken away. Shortly thereafter, Supervisor Dean Sykes blew up the entrance, with everyone still inside. Though Maggie tried to dig her father out with her bare hands, she was pulled away by others, and lied to that he had simply skipped town. She didn't believe them and reasoned that they were either paid off by Hornwrights or were unwilling to pay for a rescue mission. Meanwhile, in the mine, Williams and some others were facing a difficult decision. There was no food in the mine, but one of the miners, James, died from injuries sustained from the entrance collapsing. Several survivors agreed to cannibalize his corpse, although at first, some other survivors and Williams decided that they would rather die instead of eat another person. He eventually gave in. Williams, being the last survivor, having cannibalized so much, mutated into a Wendigo Colossus. You can find Earl Williams in the A Colossal Problem event, where you'll need to defeat him alongside many other Wendigo. Such a sad story for such a terrifying creature. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the Cryptids of Fallout. If you did enjoy, please drop a like and subscribe if you want, and tell me how you liked it in the comments. Have a great rest of your day, and see you next Friday.
Scream if you love Fallout.
Well, I don't know, but I've been told uranium ore is worth more than gold. So my cat, I bought
True
me
to
a Jeep.
Kaiser.
I got that book, and I can't sleep. Uranium,
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I'll mark it on your map.
uranium fever, it's spread.